To say that AI has had an impact on designers is an understatement. No one expected AI to begin by affecting white collar work, let alone the so called creative parts of it. But that's exactly what's happened. One model after another came to excel in creative fields such as writing, design, music, and even film. Designers haven't stayed quiet either. They began mocking AI generated work and pointing out its flaws, eventually denying the technology altogether. They were right at first, but not in the end. The technology caught up quickly and began producing outputs that many would find hard to fault. That's when the discussion turned to identifying what AI couldn't do so that designers could occupy that space and remain relevant a little longer. But I've never subscribed to this idea. I've argued that in previous articles that framing AI versus designer misses the point completely. AI is a tool like any other, and an AI plus designer frame yields far better results. Thinking about this, I recalled that there was a time when I didn't consider myself a creative because I couldn't draw with a pencil or paint with a brush. Then I discovered Photoshop and suddenly had the tools to express myself and give shape to the ideas in my mind. AI is a tool that's just going to let me take that to the next level. So I naturally began asking the question, what's now possible that wasn't before? And these are some of my explorations. Designers have strong opinions about the corner radius they use in their creations. After a previous release of macOS, there was an uproar over how the corner radius of various applications within the ecosystem had become inconsistent. The dissent was so great that even Apple's design team took notice, making it a point to highlight during their next keynote that they had fixed that corner radius situation. It was therefore no surprise that people like Postalad had made this into an art form. I love his work, and I loved a specific poster that he created using simple boxes with varying corner radii. Since I was just starting down this path of creating artwork with AI, I thought I'd recreate his work and give it my own flavor. I made the required jump from a static to a digital form where I could include interactions. So Corners was born. It took me a while to get it just right, but it was only possible because I didn't have to do the coding myself. The end result was deeply satisfying. I played around with it for a good 10 minutes straight once I created it. Hovering over any of the boxes changes the existing radius of each corner with deeply satisfying, smooth motions. It was almost mesmerizing. This was an attempt to improve on the existing corners work by integrating a storyline into the artwork. What if beauty was the purpose of life? What if there were some perfect shapes and everything was right in the world when they existed, but became completely dark and dreary when they didn't? I noticed in the previous artwork some boxes had a corner radius applied on all corners, creating circles. So I used that idea and made only the circles orange, while the rest of the boxes remained brown. Then I integrated a surprise element for when no circles were present on the screen. This transformed an interesting artwork into an encounter. Someone looking at it and playing around with it was led to understand that there was a story behind what they were seeing. My hope is that someone gets what I was going for. I think we've all heard that story of Newton sitting beneath a tree and discovering gravity when an apple fell from it. To me, the most striking part of the story was that he had the time to sit beneath an apple tree in the first place. Starting with that idea, it occurred to me that some great things can actually happen when you're bored. It's the stillness that creates the fertile ground upon which the seeds of new ideas can be sown. So this interactive artwork was meant to communicate exactly that. So you open it up, sit still, do nothing, and see what happens. One thing I've always felt is missing from most user interfaces is personality. We as user experience designers have optimized it to be efficient and functional, which is important, but they often feel sterile. I wanted to explore whether you could infuse a distinct character into an interface without sacrificing usability. So I created Sal, a coin swap interface with a personality. When you pause at an input box, Sal drifts off and dreams. When you type in a large amount, he cautions you to be careful. When you hit the submit button, he leaves the room and turns off the lights because he cares about the environment. The interaction isn't just transactional, it's a conversation with a character. The result proved to me that interfaces don't have to be purely functional to be effective. They can be functional and have a soul. If you've ever dealt with contracts or lawyers, you'll notice that the legal framework has a lot of parallels with code. The approach is similar in the sense that both are responsible for indicating how people and systems ought to function. There also needs to be as much clarity as possible, and in fact, any ambiguity often leads to errors or court cases and requires intervention for resolution. So I wondered if I could take legal text regarding the buying and selling of properties and convert it into code. Furthermore, I wanted to see if it would communicate the differences between the laws of different countries. So I examined how the laws of India specifically differ from those of Spain. The output you can see on the screen is a fake IDE, integrated development environment, that shows a side-by-side comparison between the two systems. It was my intuition that writing it as code would let me identify the faults of each system and detect whether corruption was built into the legal framework. This is usually identified by the number of scenarios that are not covered. While the code didn't reveal any obvious corruption, some interesting aspects emerged. First, the Indian legal systems code was actually shorter than that of Spain's. I was really expecting the opposite. Second, while Spain's was more concerned with payments being received by the government, the Indian legal system seemed to worry more about whether permissions had been sought for all the necessary actions. Spain is concerned more about making sure that there are enough funds to run the social institutions and has codified that into the laws. Indian laws have the same intention but seem to approach the solution by positioning the government as the one to grant permission. But this top-down relationship is so ingrained in the minds of citizens that it seeps into every aspect of daily life. I remember when I ran a design agency in India and we had to do some basic work within the office. I discussed the topic with my office manager, and his first instinct was to figure out who we needed to seek permission from in order to do it, rather than figuring out how to execute the task. I'm the CEO. I had asked him to do something, and he wanted to figure out who else to seek permission from. Just think about that. India gained independence nearly 8 decades ago. But regardless of whether the rulers' faces were white or brown, the relationship between the Sarkar and the citizens never changed. It just got encoded as law. I recently got pulled back into an old argument that someone was claiming that AI art isn't real art. They claim that, the artists that spent hours, toiling with the pencils and paintbrushes, only their art is real art. I asked a simple question that I've asked before. Should I not be considered an artist because I've never mastered those specific tools? Think about it. Banksy uses stencils. I used Photoshop before and I now use AI. The tool's only job is to serve expression. It isn't to define whether something is art or not. These pieces were my way of testing a boundary. What happens when a corner radius moves? When stillness becomes the input? When an interface has soul? When law looks like code? Each one started with a question I didn't know how to answer, and AI gave me the means to find out. If you want to see the code or try these things out for yourself, there's a link in the description. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. I'll see you in the next one.